Alright, so in this video we're going to be talking about quadratic equations, okay? And in particular, we're going to be talking about how to switch forms or switch between different quadratic equations or forms of quadratic equations. So we're going to be switching between our standard form, our vertex form, and our factored form. Now, realistically, if you're going from a factored form or a vertex form into a standard form, it's very easy to do simply because all you're doing is you're expanding. So you're going to be getting rid of the brackets and then you're just going to be collecting like terms and you'll be done. So it's really easy to do that. Whereas switching between standard form to factored form or to a vertex form is a bit more difficult at times. So we'll start off with the easy one and we'll go from a factored form to a standard form. So let's say, for example, I have the equation y equals 3x squared, or sorry, 3x minus 2 times x plus 1. And I want to go from this factored form into a standard form, okay? So I want to go into standard. So how do I do that? Well, it's pretty easy. All we have to do is get rid of these brackets, okay? So all we're going to do is we're going to expand and simplify. The way we do that is we take our 3x, multiply it by the first term in the second bracket, take our 3x, multiply it by the second term in the bracket. And then we're also going to take our second term and multiply it by the first term in the second bracket, and take our second term and multiply it by the second term in the second bracket. And then we're just going to collect our like terms. So let's just go ahead and do that. First thing we're going to do is 3x times x. Well, that's going to get us 3x squared. Then we're going to do 3x times 1. That's just going to be plus 3x. Okay, we're done with the 3x's now. Let's do negative 2 times x. So that's going to give us negative 2x. And negative 2 times positive 1. That's going to give us negative 2. Okay, and now the rest of this shouldn't be too difficult. All we do is collect our like terms. So in terms of x squared, we just have this 1x squared term. So we're going to get 3x squared. And we can even cross it out just to make sure that we don't double up on it. Then we're going to look at our x term. So we have two x terms. We have this plus 3x and we have this minus 2x. Okay, so plus 3x minus 2x, that's going to give us plus 1x, or just plus x. And again, we can scratch out these terms if we want to make sure that we don't use them again. And finally, we have our constants, in this case, just negative 2. So we can write that down, and we have our final answer, 3x squared plus x minus 2. Again, if you're given this in a vertex form, again, all you do is expand and simplify, collect your like terms, and you're good to go. So those aren't too difficult. Now the difficulty comes when we're going from standard to either vertex form or factored form. So let's say I have some equation y equals 2x squared minus 3x minus 2. And I want to write this standard equation into, let's say, a factored equation. Okay, so factored. So how am I going to do that? Well, of course, I have to factor it, and we ask ourselves, okay, how are we going to factor this? So we need to factor 2x squared minus 3x plus minus 2. So we know that if we didn't have this 2 in front of the x squared, this wouldn't be too difficult to factor, right? All we would need is two numbers that multiply into negative 2 and add up to negative 3, right? That wouldn't be possible, but you know, the idea is there. You just need two numbers that multiply into this last number and add up into this middle number. Now, unfortunately, we have a 2 here, and so that makes our factoring a bit more difficult. So what we need is we need two numbers that when multiplied give us the number 2, or the number in front of the x squared. Then we need two numbers that when multiplied give us the number negative 2. Okay. And we also need that when these numbers are cross-multiplied, they add up to -3. Okay, and I can write that in black, and I'll write it down here, -3. Okay, so let's think of two numbers that multiply into +2. Okay, or the number that is in front of the x squared term. So two numbers that multiply into +2. Well, that's pretty easy because there's only two numbers that can get us that, the number 1 and the number 2. 1 times 2 or 2 times 1. So that's going to be 1 and 2. 1 times 2 is equal to 2. 2 times 1 is equal to 2. So that's pretty easy. Okay, now let's do two numbers that multiply into -2, or two numbers that multiply into the last term of our standard form. Okay, so again, we have the number -2 here. That's not too difficult. It's going to be 1 times -2 or -1 times +2. Now we just need to figure out where the negative goes. Okay, so let's say that I take -1 times +2. -1 times +2 is in fact -2. Okay, now the last thing that we need to check here is that these numbers, when cross multiplied, add up to -3. So if I take 1 times 2, what do I get? Well, I'm going to get the number 2. And if I take -1 times 2, what do I get? Well, I'm going to get the number -2. And if I do -2 plus 2, I'm going to get 0, not -3. So that doesn't quite work. Okay, well, if that doesn't work, then let's take our negative sign and move it over to this -2. So now what we're going to have is -2 and +1. Okay, and let's see how that works for us. So now, if I cross multiply, 1 times 1 is 1, and -2 times 2 is -4. -4 plus 1 is -3. And so these are our coefficients for our factored form. Okay, they're going to be these coefficients, -2 and +1, and +2 and +1. Okay, so if I were to factor this, what would I get? Well, I would get 1x minus 2, right, times 2x plus 1. Okay, so this is these two numbers, and then this is these two numbers. And we can always double check to make sure that this is actually true by just expanding and getting rid of these brackets, right? So 1x times 2x is going to be 2x squared. That's what we have here. 1x plus 1x times 1 is just 1x. -2 times 2x is -4x. So -4 plus 1 is -3x. And then -2 times +1 is -2. And everything works out perfectly. So that's how we get into factored form. We just have to factor it, or just figure out a way to factor it. If you're unsure of how to factor, or if I went a little bit too fast over this, we're just going to have another example of how to factor. So we'll go over that one more time. Speaking of that example, let's try it out and see what we get. So let's say I have an equation that is y equals x squared plus 6x minus 5. Okay, so this is our equation in standard form, and I want it in vertex form. So again, remember, with vertex form, we do have to do some sort of factoring. And the way that we're going to do this factoring, again, if I just wanted to factor this and get it into factored form, I would need two numbers that multiply into -5 and add up to +6. But I don't want the factored form, I want the vertex form. So we gotta do things a bit differently. First thing we do is we get all the x's on one side and all the constants and y's on the other side. So we're going to move over this -5 to the left-hand side of the equal sign, and we're going to get y plus 5 equals x squared plus 6x. Okay, so far, not too bad. Now what we have to do is we have to do what's called completing the square. Okay, completing the square. Basically what we want, remember, in vertex form, there is a little piece within vertex form that looks something like x minus some variable k or h squared. Okay, basically what this means is this is the same as having x minus k times x minus k. And we need to somehow get x minus k to exist within this x squared plus 6x. Okay, so we need a perfect square because x minus k times x minus k can be rewritten as x minus k squared, and that is called a perfect square. The way we do that is we complete the square. Okay, so we ask ourselves, well, let's complete the square. How do we do that? Well, there's a process that always gets you the correct answer for completing the square. And it's pretty easy actually. So first thing we want to do is make sure that the number in front of x squared is a 1, or the variable in front of x squared is a 1. Okay, so in this case it is. If it wasn't, we would divide it and make sure that it is a 1. But in this case it's good. Then what we want to do is we want to take a look at the number in front of the x variable, in this case a 6. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take half of that number. So 1/2 of 6. 1/2 of 6 is 3. Then we're going to take that number 3 and we're going to square it. And that is equal to 9. And that's all we do. And now we're just going to add 9 to both sides of our equation. So we're going to have y plus 5 plus 9 equals x squared plus 6x plus 9. Okay? Now we can simplify this a little bit on the left-hand side. So on the left, we're going to have y plus 14 equals, and on the right-hand side, what you'll notice is that we now have a trinomial, x squared plus 6x plus 9. And we can actually factor this trinomial. How can we factor it? Well, we need two numbers that when multiplied together, multiply into 9 and add into 6. What are those two numbers? Well, coincidentally, they just end up happening being x plus 3 times x plus 3. Right? Because x times x is x squared plus 3x, which is 6x, and 3 times 3 is 9. And hey, well, what do you know? This can be rewritten as y plus 14 equals x plus 3 squared. And now all you have to do is bring over the 14, and you have y equals x plus 3 squared minus 14. And that is your vertex form. Okay? So really the only tricky part here is to complete the square. And there's 3 steps to it. First step, make sure that the variable in front of x squared is a 1. If it's not a 1, divide by whatever number it is, and you'll make it be a 1. Second step is to take half of whatever your variable in front of x is. Okay, so we did that here. And then whatever that value is, you just square it, and then you add that to both sides of your equation. Okay? So really the difficulties here are going into factored form and vertex form, but if you know how to complete the square, and if you know how to factor, then all of this will be really easy for you. Okay? So that's everything for this video. I'll see you guys in the next one.